What's going on, everybody? It's Jeff Hillen back with Selling Stories. I have a really special guest I'm excited about. Alicea, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are
Thank you
you?
for joining me. It's not every day you get to speak to somebody like Ed and takes the time away, so it's much appreciated. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So for people that don't know you yet, I'm going to say the word yet because they will if they haven't already. Can you tell a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and a little bit about your story?
Yeah, I'm pretty much a serial entrepreneur that found some success with a couple of businesses amongst a lot of failures that I've had, and I leaned into the success and started to grow a couple of businesses that are doing really well for me, and that's kind of what I'm known for. I have a
Yeah.
business, Heads Up, that basically is a national company that sells shelving and material handling supplies, and I also have a scrap company, ASAP Recycling, which is kind of like a side baby of Heads Up, and it was kind of spawned from opportunities that I had with Heads Up. So
Yeah.
that's how it happened.
I guess the question is because I have a little material handling knowledge myself. Were you tired of paying people to scrap all the stuff you had to get off and say, "Hey, I can do this and make some money with it"?
Well, it's interesting how that business started. I bought a property in upstate New York, in Walden, New York, which is actually it's a village in this inside of the town of Montgomery, and I bought 30
Okay.
acres, and I had pretty much freedom to do whatever I wanted up there. So all the materials that I would acquire from these deals, I would hoard them. I could have been scrapping them, but business was good. I was making crazy money, and I was like, I'll just hoard them because we can either sell them wholesale or we'll scrap them at some point. So
Okay.
I ended up accumulating about 20 million pounds of steel, and this was steel that I was gonna scrap. It was fall off. It was like cutoffs from the frames after we fabricate them. It
Yeah.
was all this stuff, and I found out that my property was zoned for recycling. So I said, maybe I'll get some machines and I'll start to prepare this stuff so I can get max value. That was the first idea.
Okay.
And I started to get into the inner workings of that, talking to attorneys. And then I met who is now my ex-partner. But the idea was he was shot out of a cannon and I'd have somebody for sweat equity to run the yard, give him an opportunity. Unfortunately, that didn't work out, but I ended up with a fully functioning metal scrapyard that handles cars, open to the peddlers for business, open to the public.
Yeah.
And what I ended up doing is leveraging all that material, and I ended up hooking up with he's basically my partner, who's a huge scrap guy. If you're into social media, you probably can guess who this guy is. And
Yeah.
he helped me. He helped me with some machines, and he got me started. And from there, it would have took me 7 years probably to get to where I was at in 2 years, the way I did it and the relationships that I made. I was able to kind of connect the dots and make it happen. And he wanted to help me because of the appetite that he has.
That's awesome.
He wanted the scrap metal, and I had the steel.
Now you mentioned you were a serial entrepreneur. Did you always feel like that was in your blood? Did you know you were destined to do big things? Did you always want to have your own business, not work for somebody else, or kind of what was your come up based off of the hope to be a businessman, or did it just happen organically?
For me, it was more that I knew at a young age I needed to make money. I grew up kind of poor. We had what we needed to have, but I didn't have anything extra. There was no
Okay.
vacations. There was just no extra. There was always a story about how we can't do this. I remember I wanted to play football, and I grew up with a single mom, and I went home with the application to play football, and it was like $50, and she didn't have a car, so she goes, I don't have the money for that, and who's going to drive you? And I always say that was the end of my football career.
Well, you saved your body for later in life.
Yeah,
So
and now I got to live vicariously through my sons who are doing great with the football. But
that's awesome.
but
Well,
I
I
miss
was gonna say, so when they say they're tired, you'd be like, I wish I was tired, right? I wish I had that opportunity. So
Yeah, they don't say that, but I'm glad
there you go.
they love it. So, but
That's
I get to
fantastic.
live vicariously through them. But I always tell that story because it's like I missed out on a lot of things because we can't do it. We don't have the money. I grew up with my mom, my single mom, and my grandparents. And my grandparents were very cost conscious. My grandmother was like a good budget person. So we always had everything. We had what we needed, but nothing extra. God
Yeah.
forbid something happened. If there was like something that came up, it was, oh, we don't have the money. So I just always had it in my head that I needed to get free of that. And I wanted freedom to do what I wanted to do. And from an early age, probably from when I was about 13 years old, I was doing something. I started walking dogs. That was my first little gig. I would walk all the
Wow.
dogs in the neighborhood. I would get, all the moms would leave me tips, and candy, So I had like a little gig doing that. Then I started painting pumpkins at 13. I was painting pumpkins around Halloween because I was a good artist when I was a kid.
Okay.
So I was painting Bart Simpson on pumpkins and selling them and doing stuff like that back in the day. I'm showing my age now.
No,
And
man, that's all. That is fantastic. Yeah.
and yeah, so it was cool. So I was always into something. I sold costume jewelry out of the back of my car. Not costume jewelry, silver jewelry. I used to go to Canal Street, buy it, and sell it. I was a cleaning guy. I worked for a cleaning company, cleaning bathrooms, stripping floors, doing carpet jobs, washing windows. I had a big window business where I washed windows with a guy. I would get 40% to do the work. So I would actually go out and do the work. This guy didn't want to do the work. And
Oh, wow.
this guy was one of my mentors too. We'll talk about him, but it was a great opportunity for me because I learned at an early age. I mean, shit, I could go out and make 300 in cash today for one or two. Do that 2 days in a row, make 600, and I could be working at McDonald's at the time. Minimum wage was like $4.50 an hour. Can you imagine this shit?
Yeah.
So I was just like, that's it. I took the red pill and there was no going back. I'm like, I see the
No.
light. Why should
I was going to say, from your background, you have so much really sales experience, right? Every single thing you were doing was pretty much working your butt off and finding a way to flip something or just grow business. So
always
when you had that motivation, because it sounds as if you didn't have extra, so your identity almost was stamped at an early age. Like, I'm not going to be that guy that just gets enough. I want to have more. Do you feel like that changed your motivation today, or do you still summon that kind of young Ed feeling now that you have transitioned to a different
It's
role?
always there because as a poor person, or the poor mentality is that you're going to lose everything, or that somehow it's going to go away, right? Because when you're broke, you're hanging around with broke people, and broke people always got the worst stories that you ever want to hear, and those stories play over in your mind. It's always a story of, oh, we had it and we lost it. Oh,
Yeah.
this guy was so successful. He was a butcher. And he had a beautiful sausage butchery, and he just lost the business. He made some money, and he made a couple of mistakes. And I'm like, that's not going to be me. And it's always there. The fear is the motivator. And not only that, my father died when I was a young kid. So my grandfather, after the funeral, they wouldn't let me go, but they come to me after the funeral. My grandfather says, "You're the man of the house." And it was just like, I didn't really take it, but it resonated with me. Like, I need to provide for not only myself, but I might have to provide for other people. I might have to take care of my mom at some point. So that always stuck with me. So when I started to make money, I knew that, it's not just about me. It's about, making sure that I'm taking care of some people close to me. And now I have a family, I have kids. So that's what drives me now, is to make sure that they have opportunities that I didn't have. That's my drive.
That's fantastic. And I think, when my story isn't nearly what yours is. Yours is awesome. I really appreciate you telling that. My dad was a school teacher. My mom was a secretary. So I would tell you, I feel pretty similar though, that it felt like we always had enough to get by.
You could totally relate. You have working class parents.
But, my mom, she was here during the week. She worked on the weekends. My dad coached basketball. He worked as a pool manager in the summers. He was always having side jobs, referee, still does officiate. So I always had that mentality of, if you want it, you got to go get it, right? It's not going to come to you. I didn't have anything handed to me. I had to go earn it. And I guess my question then parlays to you, now that you have sales guys that work for you, or you see a lot of salespeople, is that something that you want to hear in their story, knowing that they come from something that they're going to have that additional work ethic, or do you not judge them if they don't come from the same story you do?
I don't judge anybody for their story, because everybody internalizes whatever they're going through differently. And just because your story may sound like it's not as traumatic as my story doesn't mean that it wasn't as traumatic for you. It's the way you kind of process these things is what shapes you. I think guys that are driven and guys that are motivated, that makes me happy. If you come to me and you're hungry, that's the guy I want. And I don't care if you grew up in a rich, I don't hate rich people. I'm not one of those guys, that has a vendetta against people that were well-to-do. I always looked at them and I said, wow, this is possible. Look what's possible. It's possible for me to live in that neighborhood, but I live in this neighborhood. But look, that neighborhood's right over there. And all I got to do is figure out what they're doing so I can go live over there. So I used to use that as motivation,
No, that's awesome. When you have, sales guys that are going through, let's say, some rough patches, and maybe it's not you day to day, but they have, they're just not hitting quotas. They're not seeing the numbers they want. What kind of advice do you give them? Because again, sometimes you win a big deal, and especially in the industry we're in, sometimes it's a long project. Sometimes it's a quick flip, but when they're not hitting all of the things that they think they are, they're not hitting the success they want. What do you tell those guys?
I could really speak on this topic because I'm a sales coach at this point. I could speak from my own sales experience, and I could speak from the coaching side of it. And I use my experience to coach these guys. And what I'll say first of all is that you can't be a successful salesman if you have outside pressure financially. So you have to live within your means. So I always tell my guys, the young guys, don't get too crazy when you make your first sale and you see some money.
Mm-hmm.
Put some away and go slow, because you don't want to be the salesman that is trying to close a deal and because you need to make a payment for something, or you have that kind of financial pressure. You don't want to be lamenting over deals you don't get. You want to be free and be able to move and just treat it as a game. And to play a game, you got to be focused. So that's what I tell them. First of all, is I tell them manage their finances. The other thing I tell them is never stop building up your network. The most important thing you could do as a salesman is good salesmen are always in the right places. They're always with the right people, and they're constantly growing their network. And what they sell and how much they sell and the numbers they hit is a direct product of the time that they put in. If you're going to come to work and work hard for 8 hours and then go hit the bong with your roommates, well, then that's what you're going to be. You're going to be the sum of the 5 or 6 people that you hang around with. So, go hang around with some people that are winning and figure out and hang around with your customers. I tell my people all the time, always go back to your base for help. They like you. You've done jobs for them before. You should be using them more. Going back to them and saying, do you have any customers? Do you have any lead plugs, generators that I should meet, real estate people, whatever it is, And I always look at the guys, their receipts. Like we have, they submit for receipts for dinners and stuff like that. They have a budget to take people out. If I see a guy hasn't gone out for a month and he hasn't done one lunch, or for 2 months hasn't taken anybody out, it's like, if you're not taking people out, you're not spending some money. What are you doing? That means what? You're home on Zoom. And during COVID, they had an excuse, but now they don't, So I always look at, like, are you doing anything? I want them to spend money. I don't want them to go crazy, but I want them to spend enough money where I know that they're out there and they're meeting people,
I wanted to ask you, because I feel like you see a lot of news articles, and I know every sales industry is different, but I'm a big believer in cold calling is not dead. And I wanted to know from your end, as it relates to your sales teams, I know there's territories in some businesses, there's some just variances in different lines of business people are in. But I want to know from your end, prospecting and cold calling, where do you feel like that falls in line with guys that say, or gals, I'm too busy?
Cold calling is not dead. It's never going to be dead, but it's harder than ever to get somebody's attention because of all the spamming. Yeah. And like even me, think about my phone. I'm getting called constantly by solicitors. If the phone call comes up potential spam, I'm not picking it up. And if it comes up no caller ID, I'm not picking it up. I don't care who's calling me and how important it is. I don't pick up calls. If it's not important enough for you to give me a hint of who you are, I'm not going to pick it up. I also leave my voicemail, Phil. Everybody tells me clean your voicemail out. I don't want to clean my voicemail out. I want you to text me and tell me what it is that you want to talk about, because I'm so busy that if you don't give me a hint on what this conversation is going to be, I'm not going to call you. So
that's a good point. That's something interesting. So people that hear that out there, if you have somebody you're calling on and their voicemail is always full, there's a good chance they're never going to not have it full. You probably need to figure out the number as far as what they need from you and make it meaningful, because text them.
You better send me. You can get a hold of me on LinkedIn too, because I'm active on social media. Not really social media, but LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn. Yeah. In messaging me is a good way. If somebody's active on LinkedIn, they're going to respond to it in message, as long as it doesn't look like a robot or like a chatbot or something like that. But text me, get my attention. Say something that I want to hear. Like I got people calling me to buy my house all the time. And I came up with a response. I just give crazy answers to people. Like somebody called me to buy my house. I just gave a number, and the number is like twice as what it's worth. You know what I mean? Yeah. And then she won't call me anymore, or she will call me, and she's got somebody that wants to overpay, and that's fine too. But I'm just very brutal when it comes to that. And I feel like my guys, I want their time to be well spent. And I don't think because of the day and age that we live in that cold calling is time well spent. There's other ways to do things. I like warm calls. I like somehow, if cold calling means that you have some type of lead from somebody that person knows, you got to have something to say, though you can't just cold call. I got stockbrokers cold calling me. Hey, Ed, I've been trying to get a hold of you, for this investment opportunity. Fuck you. You hang up right away. Give me something. Tell me a close friend of mine. At least you tried to make a connection. I'll listen a little bit, right? But you need something. So I don't call
That
the
makes a
cold
lot of sense.
calls.
And I think as salespeople in the general, they're always being told to call up, right? Go as high as you can. But
That,
the
that's a
fact
big
is, it
that's
makes
a
it hard.
that's a big mistake. I tell my guys all the time. Sometimes, sometimes you lose a deal because you're with the wrong guy at the
Hmm.
company. I tell them this all the time. And it's not always the guy at the top. A lot of times you're attacking that guy. He doesn't want to deal with you. He doesn't want to even be involved. Maybe he's going to look at the proposals at some point. But he's not the guy that's going to make the decision and have the influence. You got to find the right person that's close to the deal and is the decision maker. It's not always the CEO. And
Yeah. And
sometimes
I would
sometimes you
piggyback
fight
off
it.
that. Just don't step on anybody because you don't know who anybody is per se when it comes to the
100%.
organization. From the gatekeeper to somebody, just be friendly, be kind, be nice. Be to me, my big takeaway is I treat everybody the same, right? If I treat everybody the same with respect and just open arms, I don't have to worry about who I'm worried about talking to, right? Because I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I treat everybody the same too. Like the more successful you become too, the nicer a person you have to be because the effect, the net effect of you not being nice is more because um, they're already mad at you. You just got to give them a reason to want to do damage. So
Yeah.
people are already upset for whatever reason. Especially like if you're a figure and known like me, like people like me and they don't like me. It just depends on who, and I really don't care. But at the end of the day, when I meet them in person, I'm nice to everybody because I don't want to give them a reason now to say I was an asshole.
No,
You
that's
know?
cool. That's cool. You I wanted to piggyback something earlier. I know we talked about mentors, and I think when I started out as a young sales guy, for me, I learned early on to be successful, I needed to figure out what other people did that was working and use those things to my advantage or things that I saw that they weren't doing well. And you mentioned earlier that you had a mentor that helped you get into certain business. So I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about that and how they mentored you and why they were such a good mentor.
Yeah. So my first job was at McDonald's. I got a job at McDonald's, and I actually got fired in 3 weeks. Um,
See, people, if you get fired, your life is not over. Hear from Ed first. He is where he is, and he got fired. Thank you for sharing that.
and I did a couple of things there that got me fired. And I'm going to tell you why I got fired. And I think it's crazy that they fired me. I probably could have been management if they would have if they would have seen the way I was thinking. I'm on the grill and I'm cooking the hamburgers, okay? And they give you a courtesy cup of soda. It's this big, okay? It's like a
Mm-hmm.
little Dixie cup. So I'm like, screw this. I'm not going to use the courtesy cup. I'm going to fill up a large soda, put it right next to me so I don't have to keep walking back to the fountain and I could just concentrate on the grill. So my manager admonishes me for that. And I said, and I just argued with him. And I said, well, do you want me to walk back and forth? I'm going to drink a lot of soda. I'm a chubby kid. I'm sweating back here. I'm thirsty. So do you want me to walk back and forth or
Yeah.
I just have, so he just wouldn't have, some people, they're obsessed with the rules.
Yeah.
And like I tell my kids, like rules are great, but don't listen to stupid rules. If something is ridiculous, it's just because that's the paradigm and some idiot made the rule up and it's just a bad rule. And now everybody's just rolling with it. You speak up. So I spoke up. They didn't like that. And then you could get your own lunch for you got like an allocation of that particular time. You can get certain things for lunch. And
Okay.
I liked Big Macs. And I had this, I'm a creative guy, and I decided that I was going to make a Big Mac with quarter pounder meat. So I took the quarter pounder meat and the quarter pounder buns, and I made a Big Mac with quarter pounder meat. I got caught eating that. That didn't go over well,
Hmm.
And I'm thinking to myself, this is brilliant. You know what I mean? Other people probably want a Big Mac with quarter pounder meat. We should be selling this sandwich,
Yeah.
And
It's a premium sandwich here I got going on.
and then I got into a fight. The final straw was I got into an altercation with the janitor that cleaned the place. He didn't like me. He would ask me to help clean, and I would tell him that's not my job. It's just not my job. I'm not a janitor.
Yeah.
I was a school janitor before that, and I was just like, I'm here to cook. I'm a grill cook. That's what. And then so at the end of the day, it was more like, are you happy here? Do you really want to work here? And I was like, you know what? It was I got fired, but it was almost like it was like a stalemate. And at that
Hmm.
time, it was like I was actually walking back from McDonald's, and that's when I met Al. Al had a cleaning company, and this is in the Woodbury Common Factory Outlets in Woodbury, New York. So it's an outdoor mall, and I'm walking back, and I see him, and he says he lives on my block, and he says, "Hey, you looking for a job?" And I said, "Yeah, sure." So I start helping him clean the retail stores, and he was paying me decent at the time, $10 an hour. I mean, shit,
Yeah. You
double,
got
double
you got fired. You doubled your pay. You're like,
doubled
yes.
my pay. I was like,
Yeah.
this is living. I can afford to buy a couple of video games with this money or whatever it was, right?
Yeah.
I get some. I can go to the
I'm
Italian.
getting the big sodas. I'm
Yeah,
not going to tell
I can get
anybody I
big
can't have the
sodas.
biggest soda I want.
I could go to the Italian pizza place and I can get my chicken parm that I like, that I
Yeah.
couldn't afford
It's the little
before.
things. It's the little things.
Exactly. So I took the job and we clicked. He was from the Bronx. He went to the same school as my mom, same high school in the Bronx, and they clicked because he knew my mom because he cleaned the store. So
Okay.
my mom was saying, yeah, you should hire my son. So I started working for him, and I was watching him, kind of navigate. I started to do the windows, and he would give me a percentage of it. I would start to do carpet jobs, and I would get a percentage of it. And I started to see that, I don't have to work a 9 to 5, and I was working 3 days a week, and I was making double the money I would have made in a full week at McDonald's. And that's kind of what was like that was the ticket. I said, this is the way to be. And
Yeah.
there's no reason to ever sit in an office and just be stuck making a set amount, waiting for like a cost of living raise. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah. No, I have a story that I want to share. I remember being in college. I was trying to make extra money. So I'm not even sure if they're in business anymore, but the Radio Shack was a place that I took a job at. And it was a commission job. And if you didn't make the commission, you made minimum wage. And I remember just learning about the atmosphere. I didn't know everything that people came in for. And I worked around the holidays. So it was like cash register only. I would watch all these sales guys, help all these people and then not close the deal, right? They would be like, oh, thank you for the help. I'd be standing at the register being like, hey, I can ring you up, right? Come over here. Yeah, like, let's take care of this. So anyway, I was making crazy amounts of commission. And they said after the new year, you had to come in and do an inventory count. And I said, okay, I come in for an inventory count. And I said, hey, by the way, man, how are we getting paid? And he's like, well, if you are under the commission amount, minimum wages pay you by hour. Like, well, what happens if you're over it? And he goes, well, you're not getting paid. So I go to the manager. I'm like, wait a second, I got a question. So I'm over, I'm coming there for 5 hours. And how am I getting paid? And he's like, well, he says the same thing. I'm like, so I'm working for 5 hours for free to count inventory for you because my commission is going to get deducted per hour. Basically, it's the same amount of money. And he said, yes. And I said, I'm leaving. And I left.
See?
Now, granted, I was only going to work another week or so because I was in college. But again, I looked at that and go, like you said, rules. There's no way in heck I was going to freaking sit here for 5 hours for free to count your inventory. Absolutely not.
Yeah. You just, if you're a little bit smart enough to know that it doesn't make sense. If it doesn't make sense, it's not real,
Yeah.
And you should move on. It's just.
But I wanted to go back on the mentor side. You said you had another mentor, a guy on the getting you into the scrap side. So if you could talk about him and maybe how that worked out and how you got really, really involved in it.
So that mentor is funny because that's a mentor that you find late in life. He's a very, very successful guy. He's got a huge social media following. And I ended up connecting with him to kind of put this deal together where I can get the yard off the ground. And he was cool. He was very receptive to helping when a lot of other people weren't. So I was like, all right. And we just made fast friends, and it just made sense. It made sense for us to connect and do business because I had the metal and he had the machines, and he had just closed the yard not too far from my yard. So timing is everything in business too. If he hadn't closed that yard, I probably wouldn't have got those machines. But it was like the planets were aligned. I was asking at the right time, and sometimes you ask and you receive, and he had it, and it was his machines. He had to send them somewhere, right? So he sent them to a place where it was going to produce for him, and it started my scrap business, and the rest is history. I opened to the public, and I'm in a good territory where there's not too much competition. So I did a little bit of advertising, and the peddlers just started coming in, and they haven't stopped since.
One thing you bring up is interesting, and again, I know you mentioned time is everything, but also a mentor can also have a benefit from that relationship, right? It doesn't have to be one-sided where you're just asking for somebody for something. In this case, he was your mentor because he probably had more experience in the industry, but it was still a win for him based off of the current events. So I think that's important to recognize.
Yeah, you got to be able to give some to get some. Be willing. I tell younger guys, just be willing to work for free. Go work for somebody for free. Go hang out with somebody older and offer to work for them. You're the best marketing guy in the world. For them you are. Go to them and help them with their social media. Do it for free and learn a little bit, and they're gonna love you.
That's awesome. Now again, I know there's different levels of success. But I would say just by me talking to you, seeing what your companies are about, and you talking about your companies, you're a successful person. You came from not very much and you've worked your butt off to get to where you're at. Do you feel like that success has changed you at all? Do you deal with success differently than you thought you would? Talk to people out there that are
Definitely,
trying to get to that next level.
it's definitely going to change you.
Okay.
It's going to change. It's well, it's not going to change you. It's going to change how you deal with everybody else because it's going to change them. That's really what's happening. It's not going to change you. You're going to be, if you're a nice guy, when you come into a lot of money, it's just going to amplify whatever you already are, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But what it is there's two kinds of people. The way they're going to react to it. One group is going to be happy for you and they're going to want to learn from you to grow with you, and the other group is you're going to basically be shedding light on all the mistakes that they made in their life. And because they came up with you at a time when you didn't have anything and they still don't have anything, they may blame you in some way. They, not even if they blame you for it, but they may want to punish you for it in a way, like, or they may not want to be around you because it just makes them feel less, you know. And you got to deal with that stuff. And I deal with that stuff, and you lose a lot of friends. But you know, honestly, if they can't deal with it, they're friends you don't really need anyway. So
Yeah. Now, how about, and this is a question I'm curious because this sounds weird. I'll tell you where I'm going with it. I have a lot of friends that are in similar financial situations than I am. So my friends that have kids, we're not super wealthy, but we're not super poor. And, you know, when I grew up, I had one full bathroom in my house. You know, my daughter has a full bathroom in her bedroom, you know, and I look at it as, am I doing them a disservice? When you see like how hard you had to work and where you came from, and now you have a family, what do you try to instill in your family to make sure that they still have that same work ethic and they're not taking it, you know, for granted?
you know, that's a hard hitting question because I got two boys that are ready to head off to college, and I got to tell you, it's hard. It's hard for me. It was hard for me to kind of give them advice because on the one hand, I think college, in a lot of ways, is not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, I want them to have an experience. So I ended up telling them, you know, go to college, have the experience, learn whatever you can learn. It's a place for them to find themselves. That's kind of where I landed with college. Like, it's a good place for a kid to find himself. And if I had the opportunity, I think it would have been good for me in some ways. So, and I try to just instill the fact that they need to work. They don't have to be like me, but they need to understand that, you know, what we have is a gift. It's not something that was given, and it's something that could be lost.
Yeah.
And I try to tell them that, you know, there's a good chance that you're going to take over some businesses and learn something and to bring value back to what you're going to offer when you come to work for the company. Go take business classes. If you don't know what to take, if you have a passion, take it. But if you don't know what to take business classes. At least you're going to be able to help when you come back. You know, take finance, take cybersecurity. Just take something that's going to help the family businesses, because if all else fails, you know, you always have a place here. But if you want to do something, if you want to become an actor or you want to whatever, I think my middle son's going to become a rapper. Just stay tuned for this. You know, you never know.
All right. Well, listen, I might have to do a part two if he wants to have a rap battle, and I have some history there. If you want to see if he can at least get past me on his first 3 sets of a rap battle, I have some history there.
All right, cool. So yeah, so who knows with the kids? It's like whatever they want. I want them to follow their passion, but there's always a place for them with me, and they just have to know that it bears responsibility. And I tell them a lot of second generation businesses fall, you know, because the kids are not ready for it. They're just ill prepared for it, and they don't have the hunger. So,
what about? I got to ask you on a side note to that. So now take it back to the sales side. So you have some salespeople you bring in, maybe you mentor them. They start seeing some success, and they start thinking, "Why am I doing this for Ed? I can go do this myself. I can make all the money." Right?
You know,
What do you tell people that think this is just something that they can just pick up and start doing on their own?
I don't have to tell them anything. If they work for me, they see how much goes into this. And if they really want to do it, I mean, God bless them, you know. And I've had a couple of people that work for me that didn't actually go off and start their own businesses, but they went off to work for bigger companies. And I gave them my blessing and I cut them loose, you know, because I don't like to deny people opportunities. I kind of try to train them. You know, Richard Branson has a great quote: "Train them to leave, but treat them good enough to stay." And that's kind of my approach. And if they leave, they leave. But this business is a headache business that I'm in, and they really got to be brave if they want to step out on their own. And I realize what I did more and more as I get older, because sometimes I take it for granted, like the step that I took. to start this business. But the other thing is, I didn't have a picture of how big it could be, and they're in it with me, and they're in this big picture, and it's like it's harder for them to say I'm going to go off on my own and be at this level. I started off where there was no expectation, so to be at this level now for me is a gift. I think it's intimidating for them to be looking at what I'm doing and just try to replicate it. It's going to be hard, So
That's fair.
I don't think about that, because you can't control it. It's just something, they say 90% of the stuff you worry about doesn't come to fruition anyway. It's like we're in stuff you can't control.
I was going to say, my wife's a worry ward, and I tell her all the time, is it something that we can control? Is it something that we can change? And if it's not, don't worry about it, because all it does is it gets you nowhere.
Right.
But don't tell my wife I said that. Hopefully she never watches this. Again, not to sound too crazy, but I'm going to say you're the boss, right? You're the boss, you're the CEO. And one of the things that you mentioned earlier about not calling up the chain, but if somebody is going to take the chance to call you, Ed, and say, hey, I'm going to pitch Ed the best pitch he ever got. I want to know, do you remember the best one you ever had, and why was it the best?
The best one I ever had actually ended up being a whole initiative that made us a ton of money. And it was the pitch to start importing steel products from China. And it was a very ambitious, plan. It was actually a very basic pitch, but it turned into a very elaborate plan to actually do it. And I ended up taking a trip out there, and it ended up being a really, really excellent, proposal that had me scratching my head in the beginning, but it had its time period where it worked. It doesn't work right now for a lot of reasons,
If you don't mind me asking, was there something that he or she said right off the get-go that got your attention enough to say, all right, I'll follow through with at least a response? Was there something they said, or did they bring something up specifically that made you say, I'll take my time to actually follow through with this request?
It was really just proving it with some numbers.
Okay.
Bringing shipping costs and some pricing, and just looking at it and saying, holy shit, we could beat the competition by 20%, because and it was all timing. The market was timed perfectly for somebody to go all in on Chinese. We were the first one to do it big, to really do it big. And I was importing Chinese when it was still taboo, when people still were saying, I want Pennsylvania steel, and I'm like, it's the same thing. And not only that, but we engineered all our products from China. So we actually went to Seismic on the West Coast. So it wasn't like we went to a Chinese company and just bought their products. We had everything earthquake tested. They were making our products basically. We almost were like a quasi manufacturer using their facility to make what we wanted. And I still have all the specs for all that stuff. And when if it ever comes back where I can import some stuff more volume and everything's in line to do it and actually make sense with tariffs and all that, we're gonna be on top of that again, because we have all the data, we have all the specs.
That's awesome. No, I mean, I think by just your DNA, you're a risk taker, right? I think am I accurate in saying that you're a little bit more of a risk taker than some in your position and in your life?
I'm a gambler, but I'm a handicapper. I'm a very measured gambler. And I know a lot of people say that, but it's true. Like I don't play, you'll never see me gambling on sports. I'm not a sports gambler. Like I'm not a degenerate gambler that is making crazy bets. But I just do believe in no risk, no reward. I got poker symbols tattooed on my knuckles. I mean, I gamble. I played the World Series. I like to take risks, but I like to hedge my bets and really think about it and get into some analytics and be smart. And if I lose, I just kind of dust myself off and go on to the next one. But I've won a lot by taking risks, and I think people that take risks, you get the reward.
If you had, your ideal salesperson come to you with saying, hey, Ed, I want to start doing maybe something that's not your guys' niche, what would you tell that person? Maybe a vendor or manufacturer that they're like, hey, I saw this vendor on LinkedIn. It seems like they're doing cool stuff, and they want to bring it to you. I'm sure you have your own internal people pitching you stuff. So how does that work?
All the time. I can give you a specific example. There's lines of business that salesmen want to push because they think that it's going to automation is something that salesmen tend to think is going to make them a lot of money because the jobs are big. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, I have to shoot that down every time because I don't want to be in the automation business. as a business person, you got to draw the line somewhere. You can't be everything to everybody. You got to
Yeah.
decide like what your wheelhouse is going to be. And we decided a long time ago, after doing some automation and suffering and being punished on these jobs, not being fully equipped to deal with them, I just decided we're not going to do it. We're going to stick to static systems. This is what we're going to be. We're going to do it the best, and we're just not going to take automation jobs. I don't care if they're on the table. I don't want them. We're going to find partners and just give it to them. So I told my sales guys that pitched this to me recently, like we can find a partner, but we're never going to do the job directly. If you want to come up with a commissioning program where, you guys can make a little bit on passing the deals along, no problem. I'm all about, helping you guys make extra money, but we're not going to do it in-house. It's just not an option.
Yeah.
You got to learn to say. You got to learn to say no. That's really the key here. Is that I'm become very good at saying no. And when you're successful and people are always asking you to do stuff, you get really good at saying no. And no.
Well, I'm glad you said yes to me, Ed. I really do appreciate that. I could have been one of the no's, so I want to say thank you for that. And I would parlay that by saying, the gambling phrase parlay. Do you like how I said that there? So I would say diluted focus gets diluted results, right? I think too many people, especially if you're in a new industry that you don't have a lot of experience in, you see all these things buzzing around and you want to do everything and be the everything to everybody, like you said, but you got to get really good at what you know. And when you do that, then you start seeing other opportunities open up because you get really good at something and people say, hey, you did this for me. Do you do this, right? But too many times people try to do everything and they don't have any experience, and then they lose their butts or they look foolish, and it's just not a good route to go if you can avoid it.
Well, looking foolish is the worst part. You got to protect your reputation. If I did anything right, I did a lot of things right, but top of the list is for trying to protect my reputation all these years. And my reputation still gets me all the big deals. Like we get the calls, we get the referrals. And that's because, I have a really good reputation. It's the most important.
Now, one question I want to ask you before we kind of end this here in a little bit is somebody that's not in sales, but they're thinking about getting into sales. What would you tell them as far as what they're in for, or what you think would make them either good, or maybe this isn't the right route for them to go?
Yeah. So I would tell like people that are thinking about getting into sales that it's almost like starting their own business. If you're going to be a salesperson, you're almost an entrepreneur for yourself, or maybe you could call it a salesperson is actually the ultimate intrapreneur. You're an intrapreneur. You're inside of a company with your own little business inside of their business. Yeah. And in order to do that, you have to have this mentality of hard work, like focus, and being, willing to work 16 hours a day if it's necessary, the feast or famine. When it's hot and the iron's hot, you got to strike it. So you got to have that work ethic. If you don't want that kind of lifestyle, I remember selling cars. I sold cars, and I remembered in order to be, I was very good at selling cars. I actually, I had a summer where I sold cars. I was in between. I was actually at Lincoln Tech at the time. I was getting my certificate for AutoCAD, and I was selling cars in the summer. And I basically beat everybody in the summer contest. And I sold they called them tree trunks, because they said they were growing roots into the ground.
Okay, that's funny.
So I sold the most tree trunks with the highest commissions and stuff. And sales with cars is availability. And actually, it's the same everywhere. Availability now is just as important, but it's availability to pick up the phone. But in car sales, you had to be on the floor, and we used to call them ups. And when people walked into the sales room, the showcase room, or they walked into the parking lot, they were ups. People were chasing the ups. So I got creative, and I found that a lot of people were going to the lower lot. They had a lower lot where all the shit cars were. And the people that, were afraid or thought they wouldn't qualify for credit, they would kind of go down there and they would snoop around to see what was down there. So I'm like, screw this. I'm not going to hang out with the salesman at the upper lot. I'm just going to go, nobody's at the lower lot. So I'm going to go hang out with the people that want the tree trunks, and I'll just sell all the tree. And that's what I did. So you got to be willing to put the time in. And that was 9 to 9. And I was like 19 years old at the time, and no 19-year-old wants to be on a sales floor from 9 to 9, but I did it. And I made a lot of money that summer, and it boosted my confidence big time.
That's awesome. And I was to say, I totally agree with what you said earlier. I always felt like in a sales role, it was Jeff Hill and Incorporated. So to go back to yourself, like you're an entrepreneur inside another person's organization, I always felt like if I was pitching somebody to do business with the company I'm working for, to me, it's you're really pitching yourself, right? You're pitching the confidence and saying, listen, it's not all going to go well. I can promise you it's probably going to go wrong more times than it goes well, unfortunately, but your character's judged by who's there when it doesn't go right and what you say you'll do when things don't go right. And I always told people, like, hey, I'm going to do everything I can to make you make a decision to say yes to me. And then I have to keep earning that decision every time you want to go further and do something else. So I always felt like it was Jeff Hill and Incorporated, no matter what I was doing.
Yeah, you got the right attitude. That's the way to be. It's just all about perception, and it's also about adding value. You got to constantly be adding value more than the next guy, because at the end of the day, the sale's going to happen when they're ready. So you just gotta make them happy and comfortable the whole way through until they're ready to pull the trigger on it.
Now, we're not going to give out your personal phone number because I wouldn't be a good guy if I did anything like that, but you are very active on LinkedIn, and I was curious to see if you were willing to share, like, where could people find you or your companies, just if they were fascinated, like I am after this episode, to learn more about your business and also see what you guys got going on.
So LinkedIn. That's where you find me. That's where I'm active. If you want to, everybody that's interested, if you call me first, if you get in touch with me on LinkedIn, I do tours of the yard up in Weldon, New York. So if you want to see the scrap yard and you want to walk through, and you're welcome. Everybody's welcome. As long as
I'd recommend anybody that doesn't know that area, you probably want to wait till the spring. Probably not the winter, even though the winters haven't been as bad now, but
it's not too bad actually. But yeah,
okay.
Like tomorrow it's going to snow a little bit, they say, but we really only have one snow this year, so it's like
it's been mild in the Northeast for sure.
Yeah, so I'm always open to tours. I really enjoy that. I have electric dirt bikes. I was letting people ride them, but a couple of people got hurt. I fell and I had to go get knee surgery. So now, now we're on foot.
But, it's a walking tour.
Yeah. So now it's a walking tour, but everybody's welcome. I just, you got to call me first. Let me know who you are, and you can come for a tour.
And heads up, what you guys do. You talked about it earlier. You're in the material handling business, static systems.
We specialize in static systems. We'll do the biggest jobs, just no automation. Okay. We don't do anything with motor controls, logic. We don't get into that. We will take on simple conveyor jobs, straight line conveyor, with a curve, maybe, it's just very simple. But anything with logic and motor control systems, we don't want it. We do pick modules. We do pallet racking, shelving, mezzanines, GOH garment on hanger systems, gravity conveyors. We love gravity conveyors and anything gravity. We sell those systems, and anything else in between that's static, bollards,
okay.
End of aisle guards, guardrails, that kind of stuff.
And if somebody wants to die, they could catch you on your shirt, right? Call of Duty. If you don't want to live, come see Ed online. What's your handle in case anybody wants to try to test you?
My handle is King Edward 77.
There you go.
But it's got a crazy number after it because now it's crossplay, so there's an Activision number. So I don't have it in front of me, but listen, if you want to play Call of Duty with me, you hit me up on LinkedIn and I'll give you my actual ID number, and you can.
There you go. I'm gonna tell you, I saw a video. Unless you got some years into it, you don't want to mess with Ed. He will lay you down. Trust me.
Yeah, you know what? I don't think I'm going to get dementia if I can play at this level into my 80s. That's my theory.
I don't doubt it. Listen, I can tell you one thing I'm not going to do. I might play you in Poker Heads Up. I am not playing you in Call of Duty. I can promise you that. And yeah, maybe sometime we'll have to get on the felt together now that it's back in action now for a couple years.
Well, I'll tell you what. I used to throw a holiday game, and then during COVID I stopped it. But I'm probably going to resurrect it, and you'll be on my list.
Thank you so much. So I know that I'll be making a donation. I'm the fish that everybody sees coming in. That's why you're inviting me. It's all good.
Well, it won't be to me because I play loose and terrible purposely to not win that tournament. I won that tournament and it was a disaster. Everybody thought I rigged it. So I said, you know what?
That's so funny. No, that's awesome. I appreciate the invite. And I appreciate you doing this, man. Like I said, before we jumped on, Ed could be doing a lot of other things. He took the time to what I know will be an awesome story for people to hear. And come listen to Ed. Come follow Ed on LinkedIn. And I know I will. And again, I appreciate it, man.
I'll talk to you anytime. Anytime you want to have me on, I'm open to it. This was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Well, Selling Stories with Jeff Hill and Ed Alicea. I appreciate it. Have a good one, guys.